Thank you, Matt. Well, lots of people can't live without the popular social network site Facebook. But Monday was Quit Facebook Day, and that was a movement launched by two Toronto men. And joining us now to make sense of it all is Nick Bontis, an award-winning professor from the DeGroote School of Business. Nice as always to have you with us.
Happy Friday, Taz.
Thank you so much. So let's talk about this movement. What was the purpose behind this initiative?
Let's not forget, there's 450 million users of Facebook around the world.
Yep.
And what they wanted to do was basically raise awareness to everybody and say, hey, let's get a handle on these privacy settings. In the end, only about 30,000 people actually quit their accounts, so we can't call it a 100% success. But what we do know is that Facebook actually changed all their privacy settings. And the reason why a lot more people didn't quit is because Facebook is now becoming a little bit of an addiction online. Of the 450 million people around the world, every user typically logs on at least once every 2 or 3 days. So it's a very, very sticky website and people need their fix.
So you're saying I think it was 36,000 people
That's right.
that actually joined this movement out of 450 million. If you look at just the numbers, I think everyone would say it failed. But on the other hand, it seems to have pushed CEO Mark Zuckerman to make some changes, so maybe not a complete failure in that regard.
No, it wasn't a complete failure, and the changes that he did make were actually quite good for Facebook because it simplified the privacy settings. So for those people that are on Facebook right now, next time you log on, go to the privacy settings section. You're going to see that it's very, very simple and streamlined now. Basically, you have 3 choices. You either show your information to everybody, which I would not recommend, or to your friends of friends, which I would not recommend, or just to your friends, which is basically the bottom choice that everybody should make because you've pretty much accepted those friends as being real live people.
No kidding. So Facebook did make some changes recently to overhaul its privacy changes. What did that encompass? And that's obviously a good thing for all of the users out there.
Yeah, because now you can't have every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there watching what you're doing. You got to be very, very careful about those privacy settings. What you also need to do as a Facebook user is a couple things. Number one, really, really take care of your password. A lot of you have been using the same password on Facebook since the first day you logged on. Maybe it was a couple years ago or 3 years ago. The time has probably come to change your password.
Really?
Yeah, and the second piece of advice that I have for people is do not tell people on Facebook where you are in the real world. For example, don't tell people, hey, I'm going to so-and-so place for this weekend, or I'm going to be in this town next week, because people are crawling all over the place, and guess what? You tell them that and they know you're not going to be home. That's right.
They're at your house and it's going to be cleaned out. Well, let's talk about some of the other social networking sites that are out there. There's Flickr, there's Twitter. How do you explain this phenomenon and why people are so addicted to Facebook? Is it simply just better than everything else out there?
It's pretty much a multiplier effect like most social networking sites. So when you have your friends have joined and your friends have joined, it's kind of like, well, I can't be the only one left out of this little party here, so I got to join too. Plus, it's actually very, very easy to use. It can actually integrate photos, it can integrate videos, it can integrate these little tiny app games, and furthermore, they've done a really, really good job of taking the website and now making a version for your cell phone, either your BlackBerry or your iPhone, and that's what people really want.
So you don't see people quitting Facebook anytime soon?
No, this guy is going to be, let's face it, there's 1.7 billion internet users around the world, Taz, and 450 million of them are on Facebook.
That's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
All right, well, speaking of numbers, we saw interest rates go up this week as expected. The Bank of Canada raising its key interest rate to 0.5%. That is double what it was before. We all knew that we couldn't sustain these bottom low numbers. Yeah. But what does that signal, and who's this going to hurt the most?
Well, let's take an average mortgage holder, Taz. Let's say you had a mortgage for about $250,000. This change is going to mean, my calculation is $35 an incremental payment monthly for your mortgage. Now, that might not seem like a lot of money, but let's face it, when you're counting your dollars at the end of the month, you have to budget. And let's not forget what's happening on July 1st. The HST is coming, which means all prices for a lot of things are going to rise. So I'll go back to my original advice, Taz, that I've been given week in and week out. You got to budget. Cash flow in with cash flow out every month.
Now, speaking of that, the average mortgage holder, is this the time to lock into that fixed rate if we're going to see incremental increases from here on in?
So the variable rate right now is about 1.75%, and the 5-year fixed rate's about 4.5%. So you might think, wow, 1.7 is so much cheaper than 4.5.
Right.
But the real issue here is stability. If you can fix in at 5 years for 4.5%, you know exactly how much you have to pay month in and month out. There's no surprises. There's no staying up late at night trying to figure out what's going to happen to interest rates. And a lot of people, in fact, 2/3 of most mortgage holders, 2/3 stick with the 5-year fixed rate.
You know, and quickly, I want to ask you, how much further do you expect these interest rates to go?
I expect them to rise. We went from 1/4 to 0.5% this past week, and I expect incremental changes rising up maybe to the end of 2010 to about 1.5%.
Is that going to affect your credit cards, your everything else you pay for?
Eventually, it will affect the credit cards, although the lag time is a little bit longer because we're still at very, very low interest rates. Even if it goes to 2 or 3%, we're still at very, very low interest rates.
Okay, it all adds up, though, as you mentioned. Okay, on to a good news story. The World Cup is coming up in just, I think, a week, if not.
That's right.
And that new commercial that Nike's put out, you've obviously seen this. For people at home that haven't, let's roll that tape, because it's amazing. It's called the Right the Future commercial, and it's for the upcoming World Cup. And it's designed to get fans in different continents all pumped up for the tournament, and it seems to be doing exactly that, because we've had almost more than 12 million people log on and check out that commercial, and that is just on YouTube. So what makes this commercial so much better than anything we've ever seen?
Well, I gotta tell you, Taz, I love this commercial. I mean, it has all the cultural makings of phenomenon. You see Cannavaro on tape right now, and you have the Italian, variety show.
Yep.
The video started with Didier Drogba going on a breakaway, who just, of course, we just learned broke his arm. And it stars all the best footballers around the world, Wayne Rooney, and of course Landon Donovan, and Ribery, and Ronaldinho, pretty much everybody. It was a very, very Hollywood-type budgeted TV commercial. Nike and their ad agency, Whedon & Kennedy, spent a huge amount of money, but it was such a success story because, especially here in Ontario, we know that when the World Cup is on, everybody puts their flags on their cars, their flags in front of the house. We have a lot of ethnic pride here in Canada,
Absolutely.
and that's what this particular commercial actually taps into.
And they didn't just treat this as a commercial, because they actually brought in the guy who directed, I think it was Babel and 21 Grams to do this. So any idea what the price tag was and how it compares to the Tiger Woods commercial?
I don't know exactly what the price tag, they've kept that hush-hush, but I can tell you that Whedon & Kennedy, who also made the Tiger Woods commercial, talk about two different commercials, similar impact, multi-million hits on YouTube, but
Right.
the Tiger Woods one, if you recall, was his father. It was very, very cheap to make, very
Absolutely.
somber, but the Right to the Future, very, very powerful, Hollywood production, multi-million dollars, and I just want to make sure I point out one last thing. Let's not forget, Nike is not an official sponsor
It's
of the World
Adidas.
Cup. That's right.
Well, I want to, we don't really have much more time, but you bring up such a great point. This is a company that's gone in, hasn't spent the marketing dollars on it, maybe on the commercial, but it's not an official sponsor. So is advertising online the way to go? You're not spending a cent on it, and you're getting the kind of hits that Nike has.
You hit the nail on the head, Taz, and that's what the World Cup organizers and the Olympic organizers are going to have to figure out when they sell the next new sets of DB broadcast rights, because if we recall in the Olympics a couple of months ago, Lululemon did the same thing. They were not an official sponsor, but they got a lot of hits on their YouTube
You make
video.
a very important point. Well, always a pleasure having you with us. And that is it for Bontis on Business this week. Be sure to check out his website, nickbontis.com.